Ladies and gentlemen, this is Lions Den with another news and commentary. San Antonio police released a body camera. I believe it was on May 23rd. They finally released a body camera of an incident that happened last year. Showed the fatal shooting of 18-year-old Charles Roundtree. Now, this incident, you know, and this is what's disturbing me, ladies and gentlemen, that this police officer, right? And I saw the video, through Roland Martin's show, but I don't want to go through Roland Martin. But what this proven is that police officers and people talking about, well, they're not trained enough. Why would you go to a person's house? And I'm just gonna put it out there. You know, this officer went to this man's house. Okay, he really, with his flashlight on and a gun in his possession, he didn't identify himself as a police officer. Number one. Number two, if you go to a person's house and a person didn't know you, that person has a right, you know, it has, I mean, and remember, said in Texas, state of Texas, and then I'm going to read this article. In the state of Texas, there is the stand your ground law there in the state of Texas. So even if that person did have a gun, that person, the owner of the house has a right to pull the gun, whether you're a cop or not. Remember, this officer did not identify himself as a police officer. That's number one. Number two, why would you go to somebody's house? Not I basically just putting a flashlight and a gun, and then when a person opens the door, when a person opens the door, you start shooting through the house and kill 18-year-old Charles Roundtree. Now I'm going to go ahead and read this article. This article comes from the San Antonio Current. And it says on Thursday, KENS 5 obtained a body cam footage depicting the fatal shooting of an unarmed 18-year-old Charles Chop Roundtree last fall. Officer Steve Casanova fired the shot that struck Roundtree in the chest, killing him. And remember, ladies and gentlemen, it happens October of last year. So I'm going to go ahead and read. This is what the police says to the media. And I want you guys to listen what they say. It says, on October 17, 2018, Casanova, two other officers responded to a criminal complaint made by Maria Herrera and Esteban Preciado, who were selling caldo de pollo to a Facebook customer on the city's west side. According to the statement given to Casanova, a man came out of the house located at a 217 Robert Street and punched Percival in the face for parking on his block. The assailant was later identified as Devontae Snowden. I'm going to stop you right there. There was a criminal complaint made by, I believe, the neighbor of the quote-unquote suspect. Now, when the body cam video was released, it showed a different side of the situation, right? He wasn't identified him as a police officer. All he did was showing a flashlight and a gun. Now, they're gonna tell you, well, Devontae Snowden had a criminal past. It doesn't matter. They were in their home. You wasn't identified as a police officer. Okay? And then and then he said he got a gun. Well, obviously, he was in his home. He has a right to have a gun. Right? But they shot Snowden in the buttocks and then killed 18-year-old Charles Roundtree. And then after that he shot them, they said shots fired. He said, I think that the man who was Snowden had a gun. Now, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm going to continue reading this article. Number one, if you are a police officer, if you are a cop, then when you knock on someone's door, you go and approaching someone else's home, you as an officer need to identify yourself and say, this is police. This is San Antonio police. Open the door. And then secondly, did they have a search warrant to go on these premises? See, all of these things is unquestionable. And I'm going to continue reading this. It says, Casanova, who was already familiar with the home, took the complaint down and visited the property with another officer. The video shows Casanova knocking on the slightly open door, pushing it to reveal Snowden, witness Taylor Singleton and Roundtree sitting on the couch in the living room. But he didn't identify himself as a police officer. If you're a cop, like I told you before, you always say, this is San Antonio police. We have a search warrant. If they ever have a search warrant, we have a search warrant to open up the door, open up the premises. As a homeowner, if you see a person you didn't know who has a flashlight or a gun, and you thought it was an intruder, the homeowner has a right to pull out his gun to protect their family inside that house. So this is ridiculous, and I'm going to continue reading this. It said, according to the statement, Singleton gave KENS5 in January. Casanova said, what's up, man? Because they did not know who he was. And he continued saying, without identifying himself as an officer. I'm going to repeat this again, folks. Casanova says, what's up, man? Without identifying himself as an officer. Singleton said at that point, Snowden got up to confront Casanova, though none of them knew he was an officer at the time. The witnesses says the officers did show the flashlight on them. The footage backs Singleton up, showing Snowden getting up out off the couch and saying, hey, who the fuck is this? But yeah, he has a right to say that because none of y'all, they didn't even know who he is. He could be a criminal or he could be a gangbang and want to break in. You never know. But yet they say, well, who the fuck is this? He have a right to say that. And you continue to say, it's that at that moment, Casanova stick his hand through the front door security bars and shout, hey, let me see your fucking hands, before firing 2 shots into the home. He did not one time identify himself as a San Antonio police officer. Not one time. So it says, after yelling that, shots had been fired, backing away from the property and positioning themselves across the street. A second officer across the way asked Casanova what he had seen. Casanova responded, he had a fucking gun and he pulled it out. I'm gonna stop you right there. Whether he had a gun or not, he still has a right in his house. And remember, there's a law that says stand your ground. Remember that law? Stand your ground. Which means if a person has a right, whether at a house or at his vehicle, if a person approaches you, you don't know. That person who owns that house or owns that car has a right to defend itself. That's called stand your ground. So this officer wasn't even identified not one time. Not one time. So you enter a man's home without identifying you as a police officer, and you flash lights and they say, let me see your fucking hands. And you're not even identify yourself as an officer. So I'm going to go ahead and say, later, another man on the property begins to crawl away from the home and out from under Casanova's line of sight. A dog follows him out and is heard off-camera barking. And the second officer who shoots and kills the dog. Why would you kill the dog? Anyway, I'm continuing on. Once backup arrived, the occupants of the home were ordered to come out Now they says a backup has arrived. And that's another question. Why didn't that officer wait for a backup to arrive instead of put a flashlight into a man's home? They should have waited for backup anyway. Anyway, I'm gonna continue this. He said once the backup arrived, the occupants of the home were ordered to come out one at a time with their hands in the air and walk backwards towards the officers. The footage later showed Kavanaugh recounting his version of events to the SAPD detective. So now this is bullcrap, ladies and gentlemen, because this is what he says that happened, and he's trying to change stories. He said the front door was slightly open, so I knocked and it swung open, which that's a lie. But I'm gonna continue on. The guy with the gun was sitting directly in front of me. Well, but yet you didn't tell them you didn't even identify yourself as a police officer. You don't want to put a flashlight and a gun on your hand. I'm continuing. There was a female next to him, another young kid next to him. Like I said, they both kind of matched the description. I was given, and he said, "Who the fuck are you?" And then which he has every right to say that, by the way. And then he looked at me, and I guess it took him to a while to realize that I was an officer. So when he did that, he goes, "Man, you can't fuck," and then he kind of stopped that he was doing. In other words, he tried to say, you can't fucking come into my house without identifying myself as a police officer. He was going to tell you that. But I'm continuing reading. He said, what he's doing, I couldn't see exactly what he was in his ways because his hand was covered up. Then he kind of moved it slightly, and I saw a gun. But he took like 2 steps towards me, and he was like lifting his shirt up. So I fired, I believe, 2 rounds at him. That's his story. But he didn't give the entire story. And this is what I'm saying about they will say and try to cover things up. And the families are still fighting, and they got what they want to release the body cam of the incident. So the SAPD had originally reported one of the shots fired had gone through Snowden's buttocks and into Roundtree's chest. In her account of the shooting, Singleton said the shot that went through Snowden had gone into the wall towards neighbor's house, and Casanova had hit Roundtree in a separate shot. Immediately following the shooting, the SAPD chief William McManus said it is very unfortunate, tragic incident that happened. Unfortunately, that person who was sitting there was killed by a bullet fired at someone who was attempting to use deadly force against police. I'm going to stop you right there. The police chief is defending the police officer, right? But the body cam says it differently. If that officer would identify as, hey, this is the San Antonio police, open up. Or if that officer has a search warrant to go into internet premises, the homeowner has a right to stay at his house. You can't just approach, even if you are a cop, you can't just approach someone and then knock on the door and say, hey, this is the and he's gonna say this is the San Antonio police. He didn't do none of that. What he did was he shone a flashlight, had a gun, and then the guy said, "What's up, man?" And then the other word said, and the officer, "Show me your effing hands." Bang, bang, bang. Shots were fired. He went back, and then all of a sudden, Roundtree, the 18-year-old, was killed, and the guy, Snowden, was shot in the buttocks. And yet, you said that, oh, I feared for my life. I saw Snowden with a gun. Whether Snowden had a gun or not, he's at his house. He had his house. That's stand your ground, as I recall. That's what the law said in Texas law. Stand your ground, like Florida, like any other southern and midwestern states that has a stand your ground law implemented. So, and this is why I said that this is really, really ridiculous. And it said he then credited Casanova for his handling of the shooting, stating, which Casanova started from the get-go, by the way. The approach was very professional, which is not true. That was unprofessional on his part. He should have identified himself as a San Antonio police officer. And then that's one thing. Why didn't he identify himself? And two, did he have a search warrant to get entered the house? These are so many unanswered questions that they want to cover up. They knew that he messed up. So what he do? The police chief said, well, he credited him. He did. No, he did not. He did not identify himself, and he may not even have a search warrant for entering the house. I'm going to continue reading this. He said there was nothing hostile. Get this, there was nothing hostile about it, and unfortunately the reaction from the individual with a gun was something he should have not done. In the aftermath, Snowden was transported to the hospital with non-life-threatening injuries and later charged with felony gun possession. In March, Snowden's attorney Alex Washington refuted SAPD's story, stating the DNA testing conducted on a weapon found at the scene did not contain Snowden's fingerprints. He was adamant the body cam footage would help prove that Snowden never had a weapon and he had simply stood up. So, realistically, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to stop you right there, that Snowden did not have a gun on him. And the gun claiming that he had wasn't had Snowden's fingerprints. So, at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, this is why I said that the police officer is in the wrong on that story, because you enter in a house without identifying yourself as a police officer, and then you didn't even have a search warrant to enter in the house. And that's what you need as police officers, even as detectives. When you knock on the door, this is San Antonio Police, I have a search warrant to enter in your property. And they didn't do none of that. So I'm going to go ahead and continue reading. It says, days after the shooting, Roundtree's family filed suit against the SAPD, claiming Snowden was unarmed and that Casanova did not provide adequate medical attention to Roundtree at the scene. The SAPD has not commented on the footage due to pending investigation. Yeah, okay. So really, they know they messed up. So they're still investigating the incident that happened in October of last year. Okay, really? The voice ends with a voiceover of Casanova stating, this all started because a fucking lady flagged me down saying that someone in the house punching her. Casanova is still working with the SAPD but was placed on administrative duty as part of the department's standard protocol. According to KENS5, SAPD had visited the house 130 times before, including 64 visits for drugs and 6 gun-related incidents. And that's the end of the article. I'm gonna stop. Here's what I don't understand. I don't care if you visit 1,000,000 times at the house. You don't go into someone else's house with a flashlight and a gun, not identify yourself as a police officer. And whether you're a cop or not, the homeowner had the right to defend itself. It's called stand your ground. They have a stand your ground law in Texas. So you telling me that he wasn't identified and all he said was, let me see your effing hands. And shots were fired. And then Snowden, who basically stood up, that the Casanova, the officer that did the shooting, said that he saw Snowden with a gun, which he really wasn't had a gun. He was really unarmed. And then the officer recanted their story. See, ladies and gentlemen, this is why I said that this is disturbing. And it took this year, they finally put pressure of releasing the body cam of the incident that happened last October of last year, of 2018. So the officer, the police chief, they lied about the entire situation. They claimed that that Snowden had a gun, which Turns out he didn't have a gun. He was unarmed, and the gun that did found on the scene didn't have Snowden's fingerprints. And you kill an innocent man, Roundtree, 18 years old. And so the family had the right to file a lawsuit against the city and the SAPD for, violating their rights. After what happened, it took this incident. And then they had the police counter to the media. And then when the actual body cam footage finally released, says a different perspective that he did not identify the police officer. He did not even release a search warrant to even enter in the house. And ladies and gentlemen, what if that happened to you? What if you don't know you have a flashlight and a gun, and you don't even know who that person is? And yes, if you have a gun, if you do have a gun in your possession, right? You do have a right to defend your house because you don't know who that person is. It could be a robber. It could be a drug dealer. It could be anybody breaking into your house. So, ladies and gentlemen, tell me what you think about this. Like, click, and subscribe for more news and commentary. With that being said, this is Lions Den signing off. Deuces.